Stay tuned now for High Noon with Phil Reisman.
Am I on? Okay. Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of High Noon. Here we are on WVOX 1460 AM and www.wvox.com. I'd like to think of this show as an occasional oasis from the 24/7 onslaught of Trump news. And I get my microphone, I get my headphones on, right? There you go. Thank you. Appreciate that. And we like to talk about politics and the orange man in the White House and the impeachment and all that stuff on High Noon. But as a generalist, I also like to explore a wide variety of topics and talk to a wide variety of interesting people. And so today we're going to explore the world of the millennial generation. With these questions in mind, are millennials unfairly stereotyped? Are they misunderstood? Well, we're going to find out by going to an expert, a millennial who happens to be a writer and a good writer and knows a thing or two about this subject. And her name is Erin Maher, and she writes a new monthly column called Millennial Matters for the Westchester Examiner, which is a provider of local and county news that can be found online as well as in print. And Erin is with us today in the studio. Welcome, Erin.
Phil, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming. I almost had a technical, what do you call that?
Technical difficulty?
Malfunction, right? Is that what we call it? All right. Erin, I should tell the audience that you did half my job for me, because when we got in touch last week to talk about the show, I asked you to just come up with some ideas of things you'd like to talk about, and you gave me all the questions. So you're very well organized. And you had some really good questions. And so I'll just go to the obvious one right off the top of the bat here. Why do you want to write about millennials? What is the reason for it? And how did you come up with the idea?
Sure. Yeah. So I am 28 years old, right, which defines me as a millennial, which is anyone born between the years of 1981 to 1996.
Right.
In my column, I said I was a mid-level millennial, but I'm really on the younger side of being a millennial. Mm-hmm. And every time you saw the news, online, in print, wherever, it just seemed that millennials were being categorized as all these terrible pejoratives. One being entitled, one being lazy, right, job hoppers, and we were being vilified. So for me, right, I said, hey, I'm a millennial, and I could be biased because all my friends are also millennials.
Right.
But it was just a start of an exploration for me to see, hey, are all of these names merited? Right. And if so, why are they endemic to my generation?
Yeah, you mentioned some of the stereotypes. I mean, you could go into a whole bunch of these. I mean, it's some of them are amusing. Some of them, it's gross generalizations of people. Can't stay away from your cell phone, right? Mm-hmm. And other things. Lazy, narcissistic, attached to debit cards rather than paying in cash and all those things. But the thing that's funny to me is that those are all the same things that, not all of them, but a lot of them were said about my generation, baby boom generation. And so we're sort of alike, except that I grew up with analog TV, right? And typewriters and telephones, and rotary telephones and things like that. So what is the difference between the baby boom generation and millennials? I mean, we were maligned too, but now we're maligning the millennials. Is that the idea? Is it just a generational passing down of invective and that kind of thing? What's the difference?
Sure. I mean, you could look at it like that. I don't know if you're a fan of The Who. I'm a big fan of The Who, thanks to my dad.
Yes.
And, my generation, people try to put us down. So I think it could, in some ways, be cyclical for sure.
Right.
But I think the greatest divide between boomers and millennials has to be technology. How we utilize it, how it's contributed to our lives,
right,
and how it shapes us for sure.
Right. Well, everything from social media and things like that. Which gets sort of into one of the columns you have written. By the way, how many have you done so far?
So far, I've done 2, and I'm slated for 8.
Slated for 8.
Yes.
So it's like on a contract kind of.
Just a monthly.
Just a monthly. Mm-hmm. Okay. But when we talk about technology, talk about social media, talk about Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and things like that, you did a column about millennial health, and you touched on a number of issues, but one of them was technology. How does that play into millennial life, the technology side of things?
In terms of millennial health, there's a duality for technology and millennials. Right. The first is that we have Google. We have a symptom, or what we think is a symptom. I've actually had shingles twice because I'm an overachiever. Wow. So I was just able to Google my symptoms. Yeah. Whereas in generations past, boomers especially, will make appointments, to see how they can eat better, how to treat their gout. Whereas millennials actually go to see doctors and primary care physicians a lot less. Yeah,
well, it costs a lot more too. I mean,
that's true. Right. And actually, speaking on that, unfortunately, I'm limited to 750 words in my column, but there is a great barrier in terms of millennials being able to have health care, especially financially.
Right. Now, you write freelance generally also outside of writing for the Examiner, right? So, but it's tough, right? I mean, it's tough to make a living. I mean, particularly as a writer. What got you interested in writing in general?
So, actually, every morning I would sit down at my kitchen table before school, 15 or 16, and I would open up the journal news and I would actually read your column.
Oh my gosh!
And for all you listeners,
I'm sorry about that. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I was huge fan, still a huge fan. So actually, for all you listeners out there, this is a great story. In 2012, I went to school right after the Great Recession. So, what was I going to do? I had no idea. I was originally an education major, dropped that because it seemed like a lot of, education majors were not getting jobs. And I decided, hey, I want to be a writer. So in 2012, I was doing this terrible PR internship. And at the time, I had a couple of bylines, but nothing spectacular, nothing noteworthy, but just getting, building up the credentials. Sure. And I decided, hey, what should I do? So I decided to email you and blasted out an email into the internet ether, hoping to get some advice from you.
And you brought the email. And I have to tell everybody, this came as a total surprise to me when you mentioned this today before we went on the air. So that's very flattering that you kept that email, and I hope I gave you some decent advice.
It was tremendous, and it was actually like receiving my own column from Phil. So it's actually very treasured for me, and so writing the column was just a long con to get here. So I made it. This is my goal.
Good for you. Good for you.
Thank you.
And I encourage you to keep it up. I mean, you're on your way. I mean, and I encourage people to read Erin's column. It's really good, and it's totally timely on all the issues facing this generation. And let's go through some of the issues. What are the things that concern you? We mentioned health. We mentioned the opioid addiction that you've written about. That's your latest column. What other things can we concern ourselves?
I think just going back to health, and I did mention that technology plays a very, very beneficial factor for us, but at the same time, it's also incredibly detrimental. For Facebook and social media and the 24/7 news cycle, while it's lauded and there's so many good things that have come out of it, mental health has been severely affected. Between 2014 and 2017, Blue Cross Blue Shield did a study and found out that depression, there was an uptick of almost 30% amongst millennials, which is huge.
Wow.
Yes. And, when you see everyone's highlight reel on social media, that can get to you, especially depending on how many hours a day you look at it. And if everyone has their phone, you could look at your screen time, and that's really, if you want to be disheartened, do that for sure. Yeah.
Well, and you've student debt. We talked about that before going on the air, and I saw some statistic on this. 42% of people between the ages of, I think, 18 and 29 have debt from college, and it's not inconsiderable. I mean, it's a lot.
So currently, the national average for millennials is $33,000 worth of debt, and that's just from undergrad.
Right, and that because you get saddled with debt early in your life, that slows down other things, right? Like maybe wanting to get a house, settling down in some way. So that's certainly an issue that hasn't gone away, even with all the talk about, in the political scene about talking about, these proposals that we've been hearing from Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and people like that. Then there is this a lot of it is about worry of the future, right? In the sense of, there was another statistic I saw, Erin, about Social Security, which is way off in the future, but no millennial thinks they're going to get any, right? I mean, very few.
So the Social Security, I don't really know much about, but I can't wait to explore that. But it's really, millennial retirement age is insane in comparison to what boomers and other generations have gone through.
Right.
So I read a study or an article recently that said millennials should be putting away 40% of their paycheck. Can you imagine?
Wow.
In addition to having to pay your rent, which is astounding as is, and X, Y, and Z healthcare, it's insane.
Right. And it's not like in this new economy, when we talk about low unemployment, it's not like all those jobs are paying $150,000 a year either. So we're talking about a gig economy, people that are going from job to job and trying to piece together enough income to live on, right?
For sure. And actually, the national average for millennial salaries is $35,000, which in Westchester County, that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, no, that's like poverty rate here in Westchester. Which gets to the question, you supplied it, and I thought it was a really good question, which is Westchester, I guess we've answered it really, is Westchester even friendly to millennials in any real way?
Oh, for sure.
What could be done? I mean, obviously, the rents are outrageous, right? So what can be done, do you think? I mean, maybe that's a topic for one of your next columns.
Housing in Westchester is actually going to be one of my topics, but
that's a good one.
Currently, Westchester wants millennials. I don't know if a lot of your listeners know this, but a lot of towns do town plans, and it's usually a 20-year plan. I know this because I'm a beat writer.
Right.
So I actually was on the North Castle, town plan, sitting there reporting it, and they were trying to get millennials, trying to see how they could get them to move, to their town.
Right.
And I mean, if you look at White Plains alone, all of their new building is housing. Millennials are leaving the cities to come to the suburbs because now we're at the age where we want to raise families,
Right. Well, there's been this, you probably followed this, all of these efforts to create high-density housing in places like New Rochelle, where we are here, and in Yonkers and even Mount Vernon, places like that, where they sort of build the apartments near the train station. Mm-hmm. And these things they seem to be marketed for millennials in the sense that, they're near the train, so your orientation might be to go into the city. As young people, you do that. But I don't know how cheap these things are, And they even talk about micro apartments, those.
I have no idea what that is.
It's an apartment that maybe as big as the studio or half the length, Mm-hmm. So I mean, is that the future? I don't know.
So I can actually speak on this.
Yeah.
I have two roommates because living
two
in
roommates,
two
not
roommates,
one,
not one, two.
Wow.
I got very lucky. I live in a really nice apartment up in Briarcliff, but it was a gem in coal, I'll tell you that. And I've been looking for roommates, and that was another process. But, before I decided I was going to stay in my apartment, I was looking at, rental prices. A studio in White Plains goes for $1,600.
Yeah, that's nuts.
It's nuts.
Yeah. And I can tell you, even though inflation has a role in things, Westchester apartments were affordable when I was your age. Mm-hmm. They really were. And even if you were making, you didn't have to make a lot of money. I mean, you could. I remember our first was a studio in Rye, and I think we paid at first like $400 a month, which today would be $2,000 probably. I mean, I don't know, but it was you could make do on it, and I know that the inflation rate really is unrealistic. There's a hyperinflation rate when it comes to things like housing and medical care and things like that. So, So I mean, is there? I just wonder, is there? We have an aging county too. I mean, people are in their. I mean, the average age or the median age in Westchester is in the high 30s. So how do you get more people who are young to be able to live here? Should there be a housing subsidy plan, do you think, or something like that?
There are actually housing subsidy plans within the county, especially in New Rochelle in the luxury buildings, which you'd be surprised at. But if you go to Westchester Gov's website, you will find that.
Well, that's Section 8, I guess. The Section 8 subsidies are...
It's actually, if you make less than $66,000 a year, you can get a studio for $1,600 in a luxury building in New Rochelle. How about that?
Well, it's
interesting.
Still,
it's still a lot, no, for sure.
Yeah, that is. I didn't realize that.
I didn't either until recently.
Yeah. So, and your roommates, they're making their rent. You're making it. Is it tough to?
No. I'm lucky because I pay less than $1,000 a month for my apartment. It's actually a duplex.
Okay.
Super nice.
Yeah.
This is not me bragging. I'm just saying I'm very lucky to have gotten where I am.
Right.
So I can't imagine, living anywhere else or even trying to afford a studio by myself. I remember telling my mom, maybe I'll get a studio for $1,400. She's like, that's a lot more than your current rent. And I was like, well, that might be what I have to do.
Right.
Unfortunately.
Right. Issues like that, college debt, housing, and then there are the more bigger things. Do you feel that millennials, and a lot of it's, again, it's the world you inherit, and so your life is way ahead of you, still ahead of you, but climate change, things like that, are those things that particularly concern you personally, and how does that fit into the whole millennial scene from that standpoint?
For sure. So millennials, thanks to our access to technology, we're very educated in terms of what's happening politically around the world.
Right.
Myself, healthcare, I think, is very important. I actually got my appendix out last year.
Oh, wow.
And I had insurance.
Yeah.
And, almost 6 months, almost a year actually, after I got my appendix out, I got a bill for $31,000. And it's this horrible thing called balance billing, where the insurance company and the hospital put you between them while they negotiate. And it's terrible. And I actually just read an article. I forwarded it to someone today. Another man was slated with a $31,000 bill after the same thing happened to him. He had insurance. The hospital was out of network. What was he supposed to do in an emergency?
Oh, man.
So we are very well read on that. Millennials, I think we're very aware.
Right.
College debt is something that they live with every day. And I know it plagues a lot of millennials out there.
Right.
Funny enough, we actually aren't as involved civically as past generations. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't surprise me because, quite honestly, local news is not as big as it once was in comparison to national news.
Have you gotten feedback from your column yet? I mean, it's early, right?
In terms of
readers just reacting and anybody giving you ideas?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, a lot of
So my health column just came out last week, and I did, talk about, millennials, mental health, and a girl who, she actually messaged me on Instagram, and funny enough, I talk about how detrimental social media is, and I promoted it on social media, but that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
If you look at her profile, she's beautiful. She always puts out this, content where she's well dressed. She looks great, and she said, I've deleted this app so many times because I have such struggles with it. So it's really insightful. We don't talk about it as much. Yeah. It's just a known thing that we do. Right. But if you went one by one to people, I think they would say social media is not all it's cracked up to be.
Well, I'm on Facebook. I still have a Twitter account, but I hate Twitter. I have to tell you, I really do. And I think it just gets you into trouble. I mean,
for sure.
Do you tweet a lot?
No, I don't. I have one really just to promote my writing.
Yeah.
And I shared a picture of a baby bison the other day because it was really cute. I try to put good into the world, but it's a lot of voices out there that not necessarily are merited, and it's terrible. I also think Twitter's terrible. It's just gross, some of the stuff that goes on that.
It strikes me. I always did. It sort of strikes me. It's like messing around with a Ouija board. You know what I mean? It's like, what are you actually contacting out there? It's like this stuff out in the ether that's going to come back, and you might say something that's completely innocuous, or you think it is, and the next thing you know, you're dealing with the so-called Twitter mob, right? So these are the things that younger people, I think, seem to have more of a hold on, but boy, it can really turn on you too. It's crazy.
I actually don't think Twitter is as popular with millennials as people think it is.
Yeah.
I don't think most of my friends engage with it. I have like 3 friends that I know that are on it.
Okay.
And that's it. And they don't, they'll retweet stuff from their favorite hockey team or a picture from a brand for the company that they work for. It's never really heavy or, has gravitas.
Right. Well, I guess for a writer, you want to use it to sort of promote yourself too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, you want to say, this is what I've got out there. Go to the website or, whatever. So it works from that standpoint. But boy, I've had to really stop myself from just saying what's on my mind. First of all, I got a feeling nobody really wants to know what's on my mind, number one, or at least not in that way. And number two, who am I going to offend, even though I don't think I'm being offensive? So it's like nuts. But one of the things that I think is I'm guilty of in dealing with millennials was when I assumed if I can't figure something out on a computer, if I just find a young person, just tell me, you automatically know, don't you?
Oh, yeah. No, that's not true at all. And funny enough,
right.
We're going to talk about it later in one of my 6 jobs. Since I graduated college, I worked in the Met's IT department.
Really?
Could I tell you how to fix a computer? No. Don't ask me. Don't bother. I'm actually really tech illiterate.
Yeah, I mean, I know I am. I mean, I was condemned from the get-go as a Luddite, but I can't even get my earphones on. Oh, no, we got to take a break. So we're talking to Erin Maher, and she is the writer with the Westchester Examiner and other things, but she writes a monthly column called Millennial Matters, and we're going to come back and talk more about this subject. So stay tuned, and we'll be back after the news and weather. There you go.
With world and national news with Phil Reisman.
Okay, we're back. And we're talking to Erin Maher, who is a writer for, she's a freelance writer, I guess would be the best way to say it. But you have a gig right now with Westchester Examiner, which is a pretty good newspaper. I got to tell you, people think newspapers are dead. Well, this one isn't. And it's run by an editor by the name of Adam Stone. And Erin writes a column for them called Millennial Matters. And that's what we're talking about, Millennial Matters. And during the break, Erin, we were talking about how one of the realities for people in your generation and others as well is the idea that it's not easy to just have a full-time one job. You do a lot of writing for different organizations and things like that, but you've also had a lot of different jobs too. How has that played into your experiences? You've done everything, right?
For sure. Right. So I'm the quintessential millennial if you want to talk about job hoppers.
Right.
I graduated in college May 2013, and since then I'm on to
St. Thomas Aquinas
right. College, Rockland County.
Right.
And I have had this is either my 6th or 7th job since I graduated.
Wow. That's amazing. So
I don't necessarily think all millennials are job hoppers.
Right.
I certainly am, just because of the industry that we are in. My goal was to always write. So whatever that next step was for me to get closer to writing is what my path was. Right. I graduated college and I had a few writing internships under my belt, and I was going to land a gig. This was in my dream world. I was going to land a gig as an editorial assistant at a big magazine in the city, and that was it. And that's not how it happened for me.
Yeah.
I ended up working as an intern for Consumer Reports magazine when I graduated college. Great experience.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Let me ask you a question on that. Did they pay you?
They did.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Because that's not always the case.
That's not. And before that, I had done a lot of internships where I didn't get paid,
right?
Including Westchester Magazine.
Right. So answering this whole idea about millennials, they're just lazy,
No.
Well, you work for free.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, man.
I think I had 2 paid internships and then 2 unpaid.
Okay.
And then, fortunately for me, I was able to leverage it into freelance writing, so that helped. So I ended up I finished my internship at Consumer Reports, who was, and at the time, and still is, going through sort of, trying to find themselves in the transition from print to digital.
Right.
Couldn't get a full-time job with them. Ended up getting a job doing billing at an Irish construction company in the city.
Wow.
For $35,000 a year. which in Westchester County, if you
Yeah.
want to live like that, I'll get you an outhouse without a door. So that's what I did. I ended up also working for the U.S. Tennis Association, the Wildlife Conservation Society. I worked in the New York Mets front office, and
What's Mr. Met really like?
he's a jerk. No, I have no idea. But I have replaced all the batteries and the remote controls in the suites in City Field.
Wow.
That's my claim to fame.
Well, I mean, I got to tell you, that's good experience for writing.
Oh, for sure.
Different kinds of jobs, different experiences, and things like that are all go into your head, you know.
Yeah.
So that I'm sure you could probably write a whole column just on all the jobs you've had.
Oh yeah, I have stories.
Yeah. I mean, I remember I drove a cab. I did things like that. Yeah, it's good. And different summer jobs too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, talk about the writing. How do you come up with? I mean, we talked about some people give you ideas and things like that. What comes to mind? You got 8 more to do, right?
6 more to do.
6 more to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have them all outlined?
I already have them outlined.
You do? Okay.
Yeah.
Can you give us a hint of what's coming?
Sure. So January I did health because everyone's resolution's health.
Right.
February, love, of course, because Valentine's Day.
Right.
I'm going to also be doing housing. I'm going to be doing education for sure.
Okay.
Especially talking on student debt,
right.
finances.
Right.
Housing in Westchester I think is going to be super interesting.
Yes.
And so off the top of my head, those are the next ones that I have planned in, the most recent future.
Yeah. What's interesting right now is there's a lot of politicking going on in this presidential race. And it touches on these topics
For sure.
millennials, and a lot of, you got 2 socialists or one avowed socialist and another candidate, Elizabeth Warren. You got Bernie Sanders, the socialist, and Elizabeth Warren, who is left of center for sure, talking about things like this: retiring student debt. What else do they talk about? Oh, universal health care. Everybody, Medicare for all. How do you feel? Do you follow the politics of the presidential race, and how do you feel? How do you feel about these candidates or other candidates, or maybe you're a Republican and you like Trump? I don't know. You tell me.
No, I follow the politics for sure. I don't live and breathe in it. Like with this 24/7 news cycle, you have to take a break.
Right.
I'm ready to hear what everyone has to say. I don't think there's a one fit answer for anything, whether that's healthcare, whether that's affordable housing, whether that's
Right.
student debt. I think also what we really need to look at is why are we taking on all this debt to go to school? Right. Doesn't that start, no offense to boomers, didn't
Right.
that start with you guys?
Yes. Well, I can tell you, I think I did tell you that when I was in school, I mean, it was like $6,000 tops for, I mean, this is going back to the late 70s, and now it's, 10 times that. Mm-hmm. And that was private college. Mm-hmm. But the thing that I think sometimes gets lost in this, and I'm just going on my soapbox for 2 seconds, is that the schools are somewhat responsible for, providing good education and not selling young people on degrees that may or may not help them. Plus they're beyond the inflation rate when they raise it every year, 6-7%, right? Am I wrong on that?
I don't know the exact numbers,
it's
but
really high, though.
it's stupid.
Right. Yeah.
I ended up going to the college that was most affordable for me.
Right.
I really wanted to go to Fordham, go Rams.
Right.
But it was $65,000 at the time. And,
Yeah.
for me, I didn't know what that meant at the time. And I think this is the same for a lot of high schoolers. I think there's a responsibility for, educators, even in high school. This should be a class that we talk about finances.
Right.
Let's know what credit score is. Let's know, how to balance our bank account. Why is that not talked about?
Right.
Chemistry has not served me a minute in my adult life. But, I remember when we were talking about education in high school, no one was ever saying, oh, remember, this is X amount of dollars per year.
Right.
When you're saying $65,000, $75,000 worth of debt, those numbers sound made up to an 18-year-old who's not paying their cell phone bill.
Right. Right.
So I think, and especially, I don't remember there being a lot of financial seminars held by my high school. I don't remember, I think this is going to sound terrible, but a lot of talk was how the school felt, what was the fit, and then the brand name. No one everyone talks brand names for colleges, and that's crazy.
Yeah.
Why are we pushing that on kids?
Yeah. Now you really hit on it. You know, the financial training, or just the idea of knowing what, compound interest is, even, and that's something that's totally ignored. I mean, almost totally ignored. I mean, the financial literacy of the country in general, not just your generation, but general, is pretty bad. That was a whole column right there. I mean, it really is, because it could help people, not get necessarily dug into the hole that they're in. But, there is some, obviously in New York State now, there is this idea of free tuition for the state if you go to a state college or state school or something like that. But then you have to stay in the state for a few years or something. You can't move out. You have to stay after you graduate, or you have to, I don't know.
That's still not even that cheap, though. You're looking at a state school. It's like, it's over $25,000. So,
right.
I mean,
and it's just tuition. They're not paying the room and board.
They're not paying room and board,
right,
yeah.
Right. So, well, how do you feel? I mean, the polling on millennials is that they're Bernie Sanders fans.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw something from Forbes. The under 30 voter survey. 32% of 18 to 29-year-olds said they would vote for Sanders. Ponder that. That's more than anybody. I mean, that's 32%. Hey, you know what? We're going to take another break. Phone number here is 914-636-0110 if you want to call in and ask about the millennials and or the baby boomers or generation. What is Generation Z? We'll get into that too. All right, we'll be right back.
With Phil Reisman.
Okay, we're back and having a great conversation with Erin Maher, who writes a column called Millennial Matters for Westchester Examiner. Erin, tell our listeners how they can get a hold of your column. Where do they go?
So you can pick up a copy of the Westchester Examiner, and there's 1,000 distribution sites throughout the county.
Right.
Or if you are a millennial and digital, you can just go online to westchesterexaminer.com.
Right. And also, you have your own website.
I have my own website.
Yeah.
Check me out, erinmaherwrites.com. That's Maher like Bill Maher.
There you go. And Maher. Mm-hmm. So, all right, we were talking about Bernie Sanders before, and I just had this. The 32% of 18 to 29-year-olds said they would vote for Sanders. Joe Biden, who really seems to be the anti-millennial candidate in so many ways on the Democratic side, he gets 16%. He just, I know that he in fact said some kind of not kind things, right, about millennials in general, saying, you got to get involved, you stop complaining, that kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. What was your reaction to him?
So funny enough, I remember when Joe Biden announced that he, was thinking of running for president. And I don't know if you saw it, but a picture of a young Joe Biden came out, and he was good looking back in the day. So the joke between me and my girlfriends were like, Joe 2020, baby. But in light of especially, after Me Too, and there's all this stuff coming out about Joe, and, he has, I would say, more antiquated views than the average millennial.
Yeah.
I don't know all of his policies, and I'm not going to speak on that for sure.
Right.
But I would say that Bernie's definitely more popular amongst the millennials, and especially in Westchester, we're 2-1 Democrats to Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think if anything, Bernie's big with the millennials, and I think his appeal. I mean, he was in the last election,
right?
And then after Hillary, I think he was that last. Well, one, name brand recognition. Millennials are already familiar with him,
right? And
two, I think the thing that draws millennials into Bernie is that they saw that he was on the front lines in the protests back in the day. And, for some reason, there's I think some sort of romance to that where, they see that he's, quote unquote, one with the people.
That's interesting.
I think, but.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I think there is kind of a coalition there of young mm-hmm. people. And as I said before, kind of a group that was, sort of the unreconstructed older hippies that are still around, that love the guy. And so you have this sort of interesting, maybe that's the bridge that's needed between generations. I don't know. What is Generation Z and how are they different from millennials, or are they?
So Generation Z are anyone born after 1996. And I don't know what their cutoff is, but they're in their early 20s, late teens.
Right.
They are actually going to be they're like America's largest population, they will overtake millennials eventually. Millennials have overtaken boomers as of this year.
Right. In terms of numbers.
Yeah. So millennials have reached 73 million. Boomers have decreased to 72 million.
And dying every day.
Just keep going every day, guys. I'm not saying boomers were coming for you, but boomers, we are coming for you.
Oh my gosh.
This is going to sound crazy. I actually spoke to a high school class a couple weeks ago, and I haven't been around teenagers in a really long time. So I have no idea what Gen Z is like. I actually mentioned Game of Thrones, and they're like, we don't watch that. And I was like, all right, I'm not your subset. I have no idea.
See, already there's a generation gap.
Which is crazy because, I think we speak the same language. They are very nimble in terms of social media and especially video. I don't know if you've heard of TikTok. It's an application on your phone. It's a video-based app, and the numbers are staggering. And then, it's far surpassed Facebook's numbers and Instagram and Twitter, and it just keeps building. And Gen Z is really the catalyst behind that.
Really? Mm-hmm. Do you anticipate? Now let's go into the future.
Okay.
Let's see Erin Maher at age 60. Mm-hmm. That's a long, long, long way, and it's almost impossible to imagine. Do you think that the younger generations will be criticizing yours? Now, I'm not saying that you're hypercritical about baby boomers. God knows they deserve most of the criticism they get, of which I am a member. But do you see a gap maybe happening then too, or some kind of conflict, if that's the right word for it?
I think from Gen Z, probably not. I think we live very similar lifestyles and are facing the same issues. I don't know.
Close together.
I think we're too close together.
Okay.
And funny enough, the funny thing about boomers is there's a larger discretion because you guys are more years than I think even we are.
Yeah.
And so your lifestyles, depending on what side of those years you're born, they could be vastly different.
Right.
I think for millennials and Gen Z, we're a lot closer. So there's a lot more that we share, a lot more experiences.
Yeah.
But who's to say the generation after, which I don't think has been named yet, isn't gonna, be complaining about us on a local radio show.
Well, that's what happened, which gets to the sort of the idea of, different generations, right? They'll say, well, in my day, when we did, we played with BB guns, we lit firecrackers, and, your kids are coddled and all that stuff and whatever. And then the response has been the OK Boomer response, right? Mm-hmm. Now, that was actually brought up by. You ever hear of this woman? She's a politician in New Zealand. What's her name? Chloe Zwarback Brick or something like that. And she actually brought it up. She was speaking to the Parliament in New Zealand. She was saying the age of the age of the members of the Parliament average is 49, which is somebody mumbled in the audience, and she says, "Okay, Boomer," like that. Is that a pejorative, do you think? Okay, Boomer?
Yes, 100%.
Really?
I actually don't like it. I think also, I think that's more of a Gen Z thing. I think that they were the ones that have implemented that. I don't think myself and my friends,
right.
I can only speak from a very small cohort. I don't think we ever say, okay, Boomer.
Right.
My parents are, baby boomers. I work with a lot of baby boomers,
Yeah.
I don't think that I'm here to point fingers or to place blame, and I don't think necessarily that you should.
Yeah.
Because baby boomers at that time, I'm sure you could speak on it. You guys were also dealing with your own issues.
Right.
So we're all just trying to survive.
Well, I think you hit on it at the beginning of the show when you said really the difference is the technology. Mm-hmm. And, the circumstance, it's not just that, but it's the circumstances of history, the fact that, I remember when my kids were going to school, and you brought it up too, the fact that you were starting out in the middle of the worst recession since long before I was born, and I went through some recessions at your age too, but nothing like this. Mm-hmm. So there is a difference but at the same time, it was sort of when I was growing up, there was sort of a youth revolt.
Yes.
And the same kinds of criticisms were leveled at the baby boom generation. In fact, that's the generation was the me generation, and some people call your generation
the me generation. That's right.
That's right. So you're products of us, and we're all human beings. But there are definitely separate issues. There's no doubt about it, which I think is why it's great that you're writing about it. Talk about a little bit of the process of writing. You're limited to 750 words, right?
I am.
Which is not easy.
Not easy.
People think it's harder to write long. It's not. Right?
It's not, especially, so I'm doing very generalized topics.
Right.
Do you know how long I could write about healthcare for?
Yeah.
Forever.
Yeah.
My first draft was 1,200 words. And then I was told I had to edit it down to 750. And that was a great learning experience.
Yeah, yeah.
But it also limits me in what I can explore. And especially I would love to go into healthcare and like the billing behind that and the finances behind that and how that's played. But that might be a column for another day.
Yeah.
For me, writing starts with preliminary research. Just do a quick Google search, see what I come up with.
Okay.
And then from there, look for subjects to interview.
Right.
And then I kind of just come up with everything else once I have everything in place. I read everything.
Yeah.
And then I start writing from there.
That's, somebody once gave me advice. This guy that wrote for Time Essay, the essay in Time. Anybody hear of Time Magazine out there? It used to be a big magazine. But anyway, he had an essay. He had the back page of Time, and he said, over-research. In other words, whatever you write about isn't going to be it's just be a fraction of the things that you looked up. Did you find that to be in other words, immerse yourself, and then you got to cut it all away.
Yes.
To get to the essence
completely.
of it.
There's actually, I wanted to say something really lame in my column, like millennials need to get a grip on healthcare because we actually have less grip strength than boomers. Something to think about. Yes.
Ah, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? We have less time than we wanted. And so we're going to have to say goodbye. Erin Maher, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. And good luck with your column.
Thank you.
And how do people get it again, real quick, on the website?
You can visit me at erinmarwrites.com or westchesterexaminer.com.
Very good. Thank you, Erin. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And that's another show. We'll see you again next week. Take care.